Hello and a very warm welcome. I am Rashmi Mabian Kaur, Senior Correspondent at ETHealthworld.com, and today we have with us Professor K. Srinath Reddy. He is the President at Public Health Foundation of India and formerly headed the Department of Cardiology at All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Under his leadership, PHFI has established 5 Indian institutes of public health in different regions of India to advance multidisciplinary public health education, research, health technologies, and implementation of support for strengthening health systems. Thank you so much, Professor Reddy, for joining us. How are you doing?
Pleasure. Thank you very much. I'm well, and I hope all the viewers are well too.
Thank you, sir. Professor Reddy, you have been witnessing the strategies and developments taking place in India's battle against the COVID-19 pandemic very closely. So lately, the discussion has been around the need for a booster shot. For the listeners, a booster shot is an additional dose of the vaccine that is given to build enough protection after vaccination, but then the protection decreased over the time, also called as waning immunity. So today in this discussion, we will try to understand all about booster shots and whether there is really a need for its use at this phase. My first question to you, Professor Reddy, with the growing discussion around the widespread use of COVID booster shots, do you think it's the fear of variants that is leading to these hurried discussions?
Well, as far as the terminology is concerned of booster shots, there's been a little controversy because usually the first shot is seen as the priming dose and the second shot is seen as the booster dose. Now, when an extra dose has to be seen as a booster shot, that causes a bit of confusion, but now it's generally being referred to as such, which is actually an enhancement shot or an additional shot. That is now being referred to as the booster shot, so we can continue the discussion using that terminology. There has been evidence in terms of antibodies of waning immunity, and Israel has produced some evidence that these are likely to also provide protection in the real world in terms of reduced infection rates and reduced serious hospitalization rates. So the idea is that as immunity provided by the existing vaccines, given in the conventional dosage, is beginning to wane after 5 months and possibly in 6 to 8 months, people would require this kind of booster shot. But there is no clear-cut evidence that everybody requires it. Right now, even the evidence that has come out is mostly of people above the age of 60 years. And even there, the so-called breakthrough infections with the conventional dosage of 2 shots are mostly resulting in very mild infections. Very few of them are very severe infections. So the idea of giving every adult a booster shot is something that is currently not evidence-based and may actually be contrary to current public health requirements.
So could you also elaborate on how the current 2-dose vaccination still continues to provide safety from the severe disease?
You're absolutely right, because one of the concerns is about the variants, and it's only the beta variant of South Africa that has actually raised major concerns about diminished efficacy of the conventional vaccines against that particular variant. While against the widely prevalent Delta variant, which is the dominant variant across the whole world now, currently available vaccines have shown adequate efficacy in preventing severe infection and death. Perhaps some of the breakthrough infections do occur, but they're extremely mild. But the rates of severe infections are very low, and that protection has been proven repeatedly in many countries, including in Israel, where some of the conventional vaccines have shown that they do provide protection against severe disease, hospitalization, and death. If there are new variants emerging which show the property of vaccine escape, then we may require to reconsider our strategy. And vaccine manufacturers, in any case, are working now on developing a second generation of vaccines, which are looking at how they can beat some of the variants that are already there in a much better fashion and possibly prepare for new variants as they emerge. But at the moment, the vaccines available, including in India, are adequate in terms of offering protection at the conventional dosage without the requirement of a booster shot.
My next question is, why should we be really careful about analyzing the benefit versus risk for booster shots? And what could be the repercussions of skipping these critical aspects and rushing the decision on additional doses?
When any vaccine is being evaluated for efficacy, we also evaluate it for safety. And usually the process goes through several stages of clinical trials after animal experimentation. The most crucial step is the randomized controlled trial of phase 3. But even there, despite the large numbers that are involved in a phase 3 trial, where we can see efficacy with fair amount of certainty, we can never be absolutely sure about the safety aspect because some rare side effects may be missed. And they come up in what is called phase 4, or after the licensing, when the vaccine is being administered to much larger number of the general population. Some of the less common or rare side effects may show up. And that we found very clearly even in the case of the COVID vaccines. For example, almost on the very first day or the second day that the mRNA vaccines were being administered, we found some of the anaphylactoid reactions.
Right.
But later on, we also found the other problem with those mRNA vaccines, that younger people were getting a rare side effect called myocarditis or inflammation of the heart muscle, and pericarditis, which is the inflammation of the membrane surrounding the heart. It is a rare one. It does disappear without much of residual effects after some weeks, but it has been noted with a higher frequency than in the general population. So that is why even a warning sign has been put just as a cautionary sign on the vaccines after these have been noted. Similarly, with the vaccines that are called virus vector vaccines, for example, the AstraZeneca or the Janssen vaccine, there was a fair amount of controversy about clotting in the big veins, particularly in the brain, called cerebral venous thrombosis, and also in the veins of the legs called deep vein thrombosis. And that was a matter of concern. And it was seen particularly to affect younger people and particularly younger women. So that again has led to certain regulatory agencies saying, do not give it below the age of 30 or do not give it below the age of 40 or so. So they said, give it only above that age. Therefore, the safety also becomes a very important issue when you are giving a very large number of people the vaccines. But these safety issues were only looked at in the trial with the standard dosage of 2 doses. And similarly, even in the post-marketing phase, they were only looked at in people who were given the standard 2 doses, and some adverse effects were noted. Now, what happens to safety if 3 doses are given? We do not know. And if very large number of people are going to be given, then we'll have to weigh the benefit versus safety. Yes, perhaps in people above 60 years of age who are at the risk of very severe disease, the balance will be surely in favor of greater benefit over risk. But will the same thing apply for a 12-year-old or a 18-year-old? It is possible that the risk may be still on the higher side if you give an extra dose of the vaccine. So we do not know. Therefore, even while trying to prevent severe disease in most people across the world by vaccinating as many people at risk across the world of severe disease, we ought to also carefully consider whether giving the 3rd shot or 4th shot is a good idea in terms of undesirable side effects in younger people who are not at risk of severe disease. So these are some of the considerations that need to be taken into as we move along before we rush into the fast track lane of giving everybody, whether it's a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old, a 3rd shot or a 4th shot.
What are the things that have to be considered before categorizing the immunocompromised or the people who have low immunity because of any other disease that they may have?
Since our main objective of providing vaccines, and particularly in terms of booster shots, is to prevent people from getting very severe disease that might land them in hospital in intensive care or actually may cause death. We have to look at the people who are at the highest risk. The people who are immunocompromised may not be producing enough of an immune response to fight off the virus, even if 2 shots have been given, and therefore a 3rd shot would be required in them. Very elderly people who again may not be able to produce a very strong immune response may be candidates. I'm not saying everybody above the age of 60, but several people above the age of 60 may have that. So if at all, we should prioritize them. If there are others under the age of 60 whose general health conditions also make it likely that their immune response is going to be very weak, we can identify them and selectively provide booster shots to them. But to provide every adult with a booster shot, even a 30-year-old or a 45-year-old, does not make sense. Right now, for example, the policy in Israel is to give everybody above 12 years of age a booster shot. Right now, there is no science behind it. Even if people at the upper end of the age spectrum may benefit from it, the incremental benefit over risk for younger people has not been demonstrated.
What would this additional shot mean in this global fight against the pandemic, especially for the poorer nations, where the vaccination rates continue to be extremely low even today?
We must recognize that there is a challenge of overutilizing vaccines in some countries and not administering sufficient number of vaccines to vulnerable people, particularly in other countries. There are countries which are now talking about not only the 3rd shot, but the 4th shot, an additional booster shot. Whereas less than 3% or just about 3% of all of Africa has received vaccines. Given that scenario, we will find that there is a high probability of new variants emerging in unvaccinated or under-vaccinated people. And those viruses, which are variants now developing in this new situation, can travel back to the high-income countries, which are over-vaccinated, but those vaccines are effective only against the existing viruses and variants, and they may not have the capacity to fight off the new variants. So in a sense, there is a vicious cycle that will be set up. We have to make sure that we do not allow new variants to emerge at ease, which have much greater infectivity and possibly even greater immune escape properties. And therefore, we have to vaccinate as many people across the world as uniformly as possible. At the same time, we have to make sure that we increase the pace of vaccination in other populations which are under-vaccinated, so that the virus does not have a sufficient opportunity to experiment with mutations and come up with new variants and beat the existing vaccines. Because vaccine evasion or vaccine escape is a constant threat. And the virus will try every trick that it knows in order to adapt to the vaccines.
My last question is something that is on everyone's mind right now. When do you see the end of COVID-19 pandemic, based on your understanding on the virus's behavior?
If by end of the pandemic, we mean that we will see the serious cases coming down substantially enough for all of society to open up with a sense of freedom and confidence that we are not going to see the kind of severe hospitalizations and deaths that we have seen in the past, I think it will probably be sometime in the first half of next year, provided the vaccines are really rushed fast. If the vaccines take their own time, it may be 2022 end. I understand that the United States is likely to put up a proposal at the coming UN General Assembly that the goal should be for 2022 to have 70% of the world fully vaccinated. G20 and the WHO have said, even for 2021, we should look at least 40% of the entire world fully vaccinated in 2021. So essentially, everybody is looking to 2022 for completing the job. Whether we can complete the job in the first 6 months or we'll take the entire 2022, we'll have to wait and see. And I do not see the pandemic ending formally in terms of being a global threat until middle of next year at least. That's the optimistic scenario. End of next year, that is the more realistic scenario. But we can prevent it from becoming a serious danger by taking all the steps we are doing, by increasing the pace of vaccination, at the same time, not giving the virus enough space to move around and not giving it an opportunity to mutate very fast.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy, for decluttering the important aspect that we have on our minds right now. It was indeed a pleasure talking to you. These great insights, I hope the audience will take away, and there will be a better learning in terms of COVID booster shots. And any message for our audience from your end?
Well, I think we need to keep patience, confidence, and solidarity as our key principles. Patience, because being impatient and rushing into things and becoming careless is only going to put ourselves and others at risk.
Right.
We need confidence that we can overcome this if we act in the right manner and that we take the right steps, both in terms of personal protection as well as in terms of ensuring vaccination proceeds as per plan. And ultimately, social solidarity. We have to support each other because there will still be challenges, both in terms of health, the economics, social issues like education. So we will go through some of these challenges for the next several months. Mm-hmm. So we should try and support each other. And unless we have that social solidarity within communities, within the country, and at the global level, we will see cracks through which the virus can spread fast. So we should not allow those cracks to appear.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy, for that very important message.